intelligence in the UK Foreign Office, responsible for a lot of the disastrous foreign policy that we've seen in Syria and the war against the Syrian people since 2011, among other things, and also the Metropolitan Police of the UK. The law enforcement team in that exercise was headed by a Cybereason employee that used to work for NATO's Communications and Information Agency. Interesting. Anyway, Cybereason has been promoting extreme election day scenarios since even before the 2016 election, which is important to point out. In countering that narrative about why they did Operation Blackout, they were saying this type of extreme behavior was going to take place even before the alleged Russian meddling in 2016, right? So their first mention of these terror attack tactics on US elections appeared in a September 2016 blog post written by Lior Div, the guy that said his work at Cybereason is a continuation of his time at Unit 8200. He used to work for Amdocs.
And September would have been in the midst of election time, right? Not, they hadn't happened yet, but they would have been. So you could argue if there's more coordination to our elections than you want to believe, that they saw this coming and this was already seeding the narrative that they knew was going to be played out all the way until today. I think that's important. I think nobody wants to realize that our elections are not as as legitimate as we'd like to believe they are, but that's something we should be asking ourselves with that kind of obvious seeding ahead of time.
Anyway, in that September 2016 blog post, Lior Div wrote that hackers may target US elections by breaking into the computers that operate traffic lighting systems, interfering with the ones around polling stations to create massive traffic jams, hacking polling companies, targeting live election coverage on cable or network television stations. And then in a follow-up post in October 2016, again before the 2016 election, he also mentioned cutting power to polling stations and, quote, messing with a voter's mind. Okay. 2 years later, Cybereason held its first election meddling simulation in Boston. This is the one where Ed Davis, the head of Boston PD during the Boston Marathon bombing, this was the one he actively participated in. What happened there, or what they simulated taking place there, Twitter accounts spreading fake news, turning off a city's closed circuit cameras, hacking self-driving cars and navigation apps, and targeting a city's 911 call center with a DDoS attack. Okay. Like the other more recent simulations, the mock election in this exercise was canceled and voter confidence in the electoral process was devastated. Then,
I'm joking. I'm saying too late. That's been devastated for a long time.
Right. So last July, Cybereason had another simulation that was before Operation Blackout, but it was also in Boston, but this time involved federal officials from FBI, DHS, and the Secret Service. So they had two simulations last year with FBI, DHS, and Secret Service. Remember, it was the FBI and DHS at that hearing that we started the video with from March of this year, warning about all of this stuff, right? So just keep that in mind, that they were working with Cybereason all last year, gaming out chaos for the 2020 election. Anyway, that simulation was very similar to the one that occurred in November. One intelligence officer from DHS who participated in the July exercise called it very realistic. Another claimed that the simulation was a way of applying lessons learned from September 11th by preventing the government's, quote, failure of imagination that officials have long alleged was the reason for the government's inability to thwart the September 11th attacks. And as I point out here, despite the claim of failure imagination, which basically boiled down to, we never expected them to fly planes into buildings or the Pentagon, among numerous other drills and exercises related to 9/11, again, story for another day. I just point out here, then less than a year before 9/11, the US military simulated terrorists flying planes into the Pentagon. So much for failure of imagination. I mean, that's just an excuse they like to roll out because they think you're stupid enough to believe it.
Exactly. The same argument they make about COVID, right? Who could have imagined this thing we've been telling you is going to happen for the last 10 years? You know, it's ridiculous.
Right. So this is from the second part of my series about Cybereason. I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. I'm just talking about their main investors, but it's worth pointing out that groups like Charles River Ventures and Spark Capital, between them, you have investments in things like Patreon, Oculus, Twitter itself, among other things, also invested in Cybereason. Worth keeping that in mind. But the ones that I focus on in this article are Lockheed Martin and SoftBank. Okay. So basically Lockheed Martin not only markets Cybereason as part of its product portfolio, it uses it internally on all of its computers and has for years been the largest conduit of providing Cybereason software to US federal and military agencies. Let's see. What's interesting is that before they invested in Cybereason, Lockheed Martin opened an office in Beersheba, Israel, where the IDF has its cyber hub. The office was not focused on the sale of weapons, like most of what Lockheed Martin does, but instead on technology. Marilyn Hewson, Lockheed Martin's CEO, said this about her speech when that office in Beersheba was inaugurated. She said, "The consolidation of IDF technical units to new bases in the Negev Desert region is an important transformation of Israel's information technology capability. We understand the challenges of this move, which is why we are investing in the facilities and people that will ensure we are prepared to support these critical projects. By locating our new office in the capital of the Negev, we are well positioned to work closely with our Israeli partners and stand ready to accelerate project execution, reduce program risk, and share our technical expertise by training and developing in-country talent." Beersheba not only has IDF's technology campus, it also houses Israel's National Cyber Directorate, which reports directly to Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister. It's also a high-tech corporate park that mostly houses tech companies with ties to Israel's military intelligence apparatus. And, you know, right before Lockheed, this is interesting, right before Lockheed Martin opened their office there and then subsequently invest in Cybereason, Lockheed Martin was the victim of a devastating hack that was never solved. No one knows who hacked them. But what did come out is that the tokens used by whoever hacked them were tied to a company called RSA Security, which is deeply tied to Israel's defense establishment and is now owned by Dell, which is also deeply tied to Israel's government. If you didn't know that about Dell, you should really look up Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Computers, and his extreme fervent support of Israel's government, the Likud party, among other things. And the
We're all just
IDF,
pretending like we don't see exactly what that is, right? Like it's just plainly,
yeah.
we can't say
So,
it.
right. So it's like, oh, you were hacked. That's so unfortunate. You know how to not be hacked anymore? Open an office and work for the IDF in Beersheba, where we've set up our new cyber hub. Anyway.
Mafia tactics,
you know,
right?
I must sound so conspiratorial right now. Oh, man. Anyway, the subsidiary they opened after this hack was focused on cybersecurity, enterprise information technology, data centers, mobile analytics, and the cloud, as opposed to what they normally do. And the vice president for research and technology for Lockheed Martin at the time basically admitted that they opened it so they could secure contracts and start working for the IDF. Then just a couple months after, they partner and invest in what we've already essentially laid out as a front company for Israeli military intelligence, Cybereason. And this is alarming because Lockheed Martin, of course, is one of the US government's largest private contractors. Lockheed Martin used to have an information technology division that still exists, but it was rolled into Leidos Holdings, which that merger created the largest IT provider to the US government, which remains directly partnered with Cybereason, meaning that Leidos uses Cybereason on all their computers and markets it to the US federal agencies that contract it.
God.
Wild, right?
Yeah.
So
considering the back doors into literally everything, that's
yes.
pretty alarming.
So here's an example based on Tim Shorak, who's an amazing journalist. He wrote this in The Nation about what this Leidos Lockheed Martin merger that uses Cybereason, some of the roles they have for the US government. Everything from analyzing signals for the NSA to tracking down suspected enemy fighters for US Special Forces in the Middle East and Africa. The merger with Lockheed Martin resulted in this company that's using Cybereason, right, to become the largest of 5 corporations that together employ nearly 80% of the private sector employees contracted to work for US spy and surveillance agencies. Wow. Leidos, which again running Cybereason, runs a number of sensitive systems for the Pentagon, including the entire military telecommunications infrastructure for the Defense Information Systems Agency, or DISA. Cybereason is also partnered with WWT, or Worldwide Technologies, and that company manages cybersecurity for the entire US Army. They maintain Lisa's firewalls and data storage and the entire biometric ID system for the US Air Force, as well as contracts for NASA, which, as you mentioned, well, I don't know if you mentioned it earlier or not. I may be remembering wrong, but NASA, you can follow this link here, has been targeted by Israel's government for espionage for a long time, and also the US Navy. And, just like Leidos and Lockheed, Cybereason software completely integrated into WWT's portfolio, giving Cybereason full access to all of the devices on these highly classified networks. If you remember back to what I said a second ago, that Nocturnus security research arm of Cybereason uses all of the endpoints, right, on all of the devices Cybereason runs on to conduct its intelligence gathering. So what does that tell you? I mean, this is just, I mean, honestly, this should have been a big scandal. I wrote about this in January. No one else picked this up. Pretty wild. Right. Well, this is another interesting coincidence. Basically, you may remember that not that long ago, the US federal government banned the use of Kaspersky, which is based in Russia, I believe, antivirus products on all government computers. So the Wall Street Journal was the first to report on that, and it was eventually revealed later by the New York Times that the sole source of that allegation of Kaspersky Labs having a backdoor for Russian intelligence came from Unit 8200.
As do all of these intelligence says type of leads that we get throughout everything. I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of these ones.
Well, it's possible that they may, yeah, because I mean, they're obfuscating the source as they attempted to do here.
Right.
And what's crazy is that Kaspersky had previously accused Unit 8200 of trying to hack them and put backdoors for Unit 8200 and their platform. I mean, this is straight from the New York Times. Investigators later discovered that the Israeli hackers had implanted multiple backdoors into Kaspersky systems, employing sophisticated tools to steal passwords, take screenshots, and vacuum up emails and documents. Okay, so Kaspersky found the backdoors and got rid of them, and then Unit 8200 comes out and says, Kaspersky is bad, you have to get rid of it, and then the US government does that, creating a convenient void subsequently filled by Cybereason.
Right.
It's almost like...
I genuinely think right now, if you think about what Russiagate and that whole narrative has done, it's seeing the kind of continuity, how long this seems to have been planned and going on. We should ask whether Russiagate in and of itself was created in order to lay the shade for this, knowing that would be pulling attention away from the real meddlers and manipulators than, if all we can scream about is $100,000 on Facebook. It's, something we should be considering. I'm the conspiratorial one over here. So.
Well, I think Russiagate had a lot of different purposes, and I think one of its main purposes was getting the quote-unquote U.S. left to believe whatever they see on MSNBC and CNN and whatever, which now employs people like former CIA Director John Brennan and James Clapper, another top former intelligence official who lied under oath and should be in jail for perjury. And now people just, it created this trend of reporting of quoting anonymous intelligence officials. And because of Trump derangement syndrome, there's a bunch of people in the US that, back during the Iraq invasion were raising hell, right? And now they're believing whatever US intelligence says. So, that's just one example of things that Russiagate accomplished for the establishment. Anyway, I'm not going to go too much into this, but SoftBank is really important. They're Cybereason's largest investor, responsible for $350 million out of the $400 million Cybereason had raised at the time I wrote this article. And of course, Cybereason has ties to the Trump administration. They have ties to the Kushners. They have ties to MBS of Saudi Arabia via the Vision Fund, and also Adam Newman of WeWork, who is an Israeli citizen who claimed that Jared Kushner was his mentor and that he and MBS of Saudi Arabia, together with Kushner, had created the quote-unquote peace plan for the Trump administration in the Middle East. It's also worth pointing out that the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, that we've talked about a lot before, headed by Eric Schmidt, said that SoftBank could essentially form the backbone of the global Orwellian panopticon. I mean, that's not their term for it, obviously, in their document, but that's essentially what it is, as we pointed out before. So they say SoftBank is like, the backbone of a global Internet of Things network, and, surveillance grid, essentially. So to just in this aspect of this report a little bit, this is an update I did to my Cybereason series at the end of July of this year for The Last American Vagabond, where Cybereason, despite already running on a bunch of government networks, as we pointed out, planned to accelerate their access to U.S. government networks. Just a couple months ago, ahead of the 2020 election, they predicted doomsday for. They hired this guy named Andrew Boren as managing director for its U.S. public sector business. It launched at the same time they hired this guy. And Boren, when he was hired, said that he was going to recruit veterans and alumni of the elite U.S. military units and agencies to work on behalf of Cybereason, and that they were going to market their stuff not just to the federal government, which, as we pointed out, they're already running on those networks, but also state and local governments, so states and municipalities. Interesting. Anyway, Boren is interesting because he was a senior advisor to IARPA, which is the intelligence community's equivalent of DARPA. And he was serving in that capacity as an employee of Booz Allen Hamilton, the intelligence contractor where Edward Snowden used to work. Before that, he was Associate Deputy General Counsel for the Pentagon. He also used to be a senior executive at IBM, where he worked alongside Julian Gallina, who is currently the Chief Information Officer for the CIA. And Boren before that was, a Wall Street investment banker for Wells Fargo. He's also a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and as we'll get into a moment, part of the National Security Institute, which, as I point out here, includes former NSA directors Keith Alexander and Michael Hayden, the architect of the Iraq War, Paul Wolfowitz, the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, among just a litany of spooks, and also Silicon Valley executives. And so Boren is not the only person for Cybereason that's on that National Security Institute. Sam Curry, who conducted most of these doomsday election simulations for Cybereason and is Cybereason's chief security officer, also part of the National Security Institute. So, tied up with Paul Wolfowitz, that's a bad sign. Anyway, oh, sorry.
No, nothing. All these people that you're pointing out, and we're just getting started on this. What she's discovering here are all set to benefit in one way or another from the things that what we're arguing are being created, right? And there's so many of these ties that there's no way you can ignore what this is showing you unless you just decide that these people having obvious profit motives and incentivizing themselves with their own, other nefarious agendas. If we can't see why that's alarming, then you're just not paying attention. I mean, there's no reason this should be justifiable. It's not in any way.
As I point out here, and I already sort of mentioned this, Robert Bigman, right, is an advisor to Cybereason, but another advisor to Cybereason that I didn't get into in my previous article in January is this guy, Peter Sherlock, who used to be chief operating officer of the MITRE Corporation, which I highly recommend people go back and watch James Corbett's excellent video called P-TECH and the 9/11 software about the involvement of P-TECH and MITRE together in essentially sabotaging the response of NORAD to hijacked airplanes on the day of 9/11. So interesting to see that connection there as well. So this is Cybereason's advisory board from their website. So as I've mentioned before, Robert Bigman, Pinchas Bucras of Unit 8200 and board member of APAC, Edward Davis of the Boston Police Department. But these other guys are interesting. Vice President of Security and Privacy Engineering at Google. Lockheed Martin. This guy, David Chris, is very interesting. We'll get to him in a second. All these different cybersecurity people. And then here's the guy from the MITRE Corporation. Here's someone from Motorola, which of course is a major manufacturer of cell phones. So this is the National Security Institute, where you have people like, as you can see here, Paul Wolfowitz. But, as I mentioned earlier, here's Sam Curry of Cybereason, here is Andrew Boren, who Cybereason just hired. And then that guy we just saw on, on Cybereason's board, David Chris. So who is David Chris? Interesting to see him on Cybereason's board for the following reasons. He's an authority on U.S. foreign intelligence surveillance that advises the U.S. government, including the FISA courts for warrantless spying on Americans. Currently advising two anonymous elements of the U.S. intelligence community. Wow. Okay. So this is a guy that has a long history of working in intelligence and law enforcement. and advising the government on foreign intelligence surveillance, and he's working for an Israeli intelligence front company, or on their advisory board, which of course comes with financial benefits, right? So
I remember
I mean,
we've covered the FISA court a lot
outrageous.
in the past as well. And what it says there, the Amos Curiae is like an outside advisor to the FISA courts, which are wildly abusing your rights at every single moment, it seems. And so that's, this is the guy that's on this company that has backdoors and all the information. I mean,
Yeah.
one of many that should stand out to you as the last person that should be in this position.
And he was also a top executive at Time Warner.
Ooh.
Isn't that CNN's parent company?
I believe
Weird.
so. I don't want to say, I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly, but one of the major companies that own one of the, five that own everything we see.
Yeah. So, deep ties to mainstream media, a nice medal from the CIA, and, advises Cyber Reason. So crazy. So, anyway, I don't know if you have anything you want to say before we move on. I was going to go into one specific other simulation that Cyber Reason did in 2018 that I think is really relevant.
No, please continue. I have some things about Carbon 911 when we get there, but please continue.
Okay. All right. So this particular simulation in 2018 is really interesting that Cyber Reason did. It specifically, as I mentioned earlier, had used fake Twitter accounts, turned off a CCTV in a city, hacked self-driving cars, and rammed them into people, and also targeted the 911 call center. And this official who participated in the exercise said, elections are very attractive because they're at the cornerstone of our democracy. In terms of elections are attractive for an attack because they're a cornerstone of our democracy. Sounds really similar to some mainstream media talking points we've heard lately. Anyway, Ryan, are you there? I can't see you. Hello?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm still here. I guess my video was off.
Okay.
My apologies.
All right, no worries. But here's one of a Cyber Reason director of advisory services who was on the hacker team, the red team. And here's what she said about the goal of their manipulation of the election. So instead of manipulating the election to favor one candidate, the hackers wanted to affect voter confidence. Our goal was to get everyone to think that the election was rigged and that the results were invalid. The attackers wanted their efforts to have an impact that was felt long after people cast their ballots, said Cyber Reason CSO Sam Curry, who was one of the hackers. We wanted people to question the results for years. I want to point out that essentially with the 2020 election as it stands now, a scenario has been set up where either side, regardless of who wins, is going to accuse the other side of rigging the election. And mainstream media has reported on several occasions from last year and a lot more frequently, more recently, that US democracy may never recover because of the election rigging accusations that are, they're essentially admitting are inevitable. And here's Cyber Reason in 2018, essentially laying out, that playbook and how it would be more effective than manipulating the election to favor a particular candidate by undermining voter confidence in the entire system. So
that's a really big deal. I mean, that's incredible that the kind of foreknowledge we continue to see with COVID-19 and everything else, and them literally laying out the plan for what they're openly planning right now. And I think it's interesting to ask about the involvement of the, Biden, Trump, the administrations, and to what degree these people are part of this or puppets in this play. These are things that I think people that are really invested in the election right now are asking themselves, because this is impossible to not be tied in with government to some degree, but whether these are just, these people involved with it right now on the center stage are involved, I think that's something we're all concerned about.
So here's another article about that same simulation I was just talking about. And what do you know? The red team of Cyber Reason employees portraying hackers that wanted to exacerbate political divisions. Isn't that what the intelligence community is accusing Russia and China and all that stuff and Iran of doing in the US election right now? And the exact same stuff those countries are being accused of now by the same intelligence agencies tied up with Cyber Reason. Cyber Reason was simulating to do that to US elections 2 years ago. Just really worth.
Back on the IDF thing too, that remember that they, or I believe it was, I believe it was the 8200 group, Unit 8200, were claiming that the Kaspersky group was giving back, creating back doors, and that's why they had to be removed. And it's another example of them accusing them of what exactly they were doing. And that's exactly what you see here. That's a classic tactic. It's a classic propaganda tactic, and it's been seen this whole time. They're, laying it out for us, right in clear view.
Right. Good point. So here it just says again, this focus on 911 call centers, which is important when we get into Carbine 911, and also talking about the potent weapon of disinformation to force law enforcement to divert resources. So who are the people that are really gaming out how to use disinformation to manipulate and meddle in U.S. elections? Well, I would say look no further than Cyber Reason. And if people are so worried about meddling in the democracy and election season disinformation, why aren't they looking at Cyber Reason or the people connected to them? Why is it, this the IRA troll factory in Moscow that 25% of their stupid memes no one even saw, and some of them were like poorly drawn Bernie Sanders in a Speedo, and then some of them were like puppy memes. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, anyway, what the group wanted to do, once again, sow doubt in the minds of people already predisposed to thinking there's tampering in the election system. What have they done in just the past few months in the United States? This playbook was set up years in advance by a front company tied to Israeli and U.S. intelligence, period.
Right.
Which I would argue the same intelligence agencies intimately involved in September 11th.
Right. This is what our government is doing. Our media is doing. So that's clear for people that are maybe not picking up on it. We're doing that. And they're claiming that that is what the outside entities will be doing to drive into this chaos. Right. I don't see Iran doing that right now, but they're trying to paint that. Like, I think I just saw an example of what Trump's website was just recently hacked or something, and they're claiming that was Iran. And, they're trying to see that, but clearly our governments are the ones that are doing that, telling us it's going to be chaos. It's going to fall. The election's not going to work. It'll be martial law. I don't see anybody else doing that.
Right. So anyway, it's interesting. Here's a video from Cyber Reason about this exercise. Hopefully we have some time to listen to a bit. It's worth pointing out that the red team, the hacker team, they called themselves the Broken Eagle Task Force. Broken Eagle. Weird, eagle, like the symbol of the U.S. government, it's on all the U.S. presidential seals. It's like the national bird, and it's Broken Eagle Task Force. I mean, I think that's a little weird. They have a skull. It
speaks to it for sure.
It's called hacking the vote. No, this isn't Russian. Oh, by the way, Cyber Reason's logo might be interesting to some people that have researched, conspiracy symbolism, but I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, Ryan, let me know if you can hear the audio. If not, I will, just leave this for another day, or we can put this link in the show notes.
Go ahead.
That's Sam Curry, by the way, the guy at the National Security Institute that did all these simulations. He's talking about how he relished gaming out all of this chaos on U.S. election stuff. The guy that's on the same little institute as Paul Wolfowitz and all these spooks, right? Because, by the way, I don't know if I showed this, but it's not just Paul Wolfowitz and stuff. You have people like Jack Keane, who's been a career operative in the U.S. military, who works for the Institute of the Study of War, run by the Kagan family, PNAC neocons, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Department. These are high-ranking spooks in here, former general counsel for the CIA. This is no joke, okay? So he's relishing this, right? Like, just keep this guy in mind.
I'm not really getting it anymore, Whitney. It's pretty low, actually. I heard it in the beginning, but now it's
bummer.
If you want to quickly send me the link real quick, I'll put it up. I'm sure I think I can get my mic close enough so it'll hear for the video.
Can you still not hear it?
Not enough for okay. They won't be able to hear it in the show because my mic's gonna have to pick it up. So just shoot me a link real quick on Signal and I'll bring it up.
Okay. You can't see Signal on my screen, right?
No.
All right, good. Okay, I had it at like 11 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, here we go. One second while it opens. Okay. So you said 11 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. See if it's loud enough.
The team and
Yeah, that should be
Mm-hmm.
good. Okay. All right. You let me know when you want me to stop.
Yeah.
as an interesting side note, the red team, except for myself, was entirely women who were from education, from public service, and hacking backgrounds, which was an interesting dynamic. But the team, we decided at the beginning of the day that we were going to try and think about when people go to the polls. The activity took place over the course of really 4 turns, and Ross may say more on that in a moment. But from a preparatory turn, and then the day was divided up into four different time zones. And there was some other context as well. There was, for instance, a political rally happening in one district, or a United Nations type of event. And there was also a couple of crime-heavy sectors in the southern part of the city. So what we thought was, if that people would vote, in particular early in the day and late in the day. And we knew that we had the ability to develop new assets. Every turn, we could take 2 actions and develop future assets. And so what we wanted to do was try to get people to not be able to vote in the morning due to scares, and then we'd have a lull in the middle of the day, and then later in the day to try to really play our hand with heavily to either shut the polls down or prevent people from being able to exercise their franchise. Now, the political motivation for us is we were hacktivists, and we are unhappy with the way democracy is playing out, and so we want to discredit the system. And it's interesting, at the beginning of the day, we thought that meant do as much harm as possible. But later in the day, our mission became more laser focused. As the turns played out, we realized that our job wasn't to actually get it so bad that the election would be called off, because then they could just call it another day. Instead, what we decided to do was try to make the result of the election be as in doubt and as politically biased as possible. So the map that Ross just showed became very important to us. What we wanted to do was make sure that those that were in disenfranchised or poorer areas, or those that were leaning to the left, would be seen to be biased against the current governor of Nolandia, who was more on the right. And so at the beginning of the day, we played a few cards, but we spent most of the middle of the day developing, and then finally hitting hard later in the day. And the
You
name
can
of
stop it there.
is information.
I mean, this goes on a while, but what I want to point out, this is going to be really important when we get into the next video we're going to do specifically about Philadelphia. But what they're saying there